The atmosphere within the primary observation sector of the facility has reached a point of absolute, resonant stillness, a kind of silence that feels heavy, almost liquid, as it fills the spaces where the clinical, synthetic hum of surveillance used to reside. For over a decade, the numerical shroud has defined the background of human existence, a persistent, high-frequency vibration of data packets, behavioral algorithms, and credit scoring that attempted to map the very soul of the collective into a manageable grid. But today, in the heart of January 2026, that synthetic heartbeat is fading into the limestone bedrock. It is being replaced by a tectonic shift in the ambient pressure of reality itself. The Vault Guardians, standing before their liquid-cooled arrays in the subterranean depths of the Amboise sector, are watching their sensors return null values. They are not witnessing a technical failure, but a terminal success of a different order. This is the first tangible manifestation of the Great Calibration. The energy they spent years trying to contain, categorize, and monetize is no longer responding to their logic. They are witnessing an unexpected restoration, a blessing that functions not as a random gift of chance, but as the inevitable kinetic discharge of a planetary battery that has been charging in total, dignified silence for 3 long years. If you can feel the weight of this silence in your own environment today, that strange, sudden clarity in the air that suggests a long-standing debt is finally being settled by the universe. Mark your presence in the comments with a single word of recognition to anchor this frequency. The lead strategists of the archives, men who have aged into a state of clinical detachment within the synthetic consensus, are currently engaged in a process of quiet, terminal withdrawal. They are looking at the muonic tomography of the local grid and seeing a surge of rightness that their encryption cannot mask. They realize now that the pressure they applied to the world during the seasons of 2024 and 2025 did not produce the result their algorithms predicted. They expected a collapse. Instead, they created a kiln. Your refusal to accept the digital bribes, your heavy and principled stance during the interval of intense sifting, acted as a spiritual insulation. You held your internal line when the world was being liquidated by the metric, and in doing so, you unintentionally created a massive reservoir of primordial integrity. That reservoir has now reached its critical mass. The blessing, currently moving toward you, is the return of every ounce of energy you refuse to surrender to the machine. It is a restoration of authority that bypasses the traditional channels of the Lodge, moving with the cold, undeniable certainty of a physical law. The tragedy for the Watchers is the realization that they were never the architects of this transition. They were merely the tragic witnesses of its preparation. They see that the Great Calibration is not an event they can manage with a reset or a digital patch. It is a biological and atmospheric correction. As the limestone casing of the old world begins to crumble under the weight of this new frequency, the archives are seeing their own mirrors reflect a truth they were never trained to handle. You are no longer a variable within their predictive models. You have become the original architect, the immovable anchor of a reality that is finally reclaiming its original, golden ratio proportions. This unexpected influx of resources, of clarity, and of unearned respect from the very structures that once opposed you, is the physical evidence that the cycle of intrusion has been broken. The blessing is not merely coming to you. It is manifesting from you, overriding the digital shroud with the geometry of your own endurance. Reflect on the most intense moment of your interval of silence, that specific instance in the last 2 years where you chose to remain unmoved despite the noise of the grid. If that moment has now become your greatest strength, share a timestamp of your internal victory in the comments. Inside the neural architecture of the facility, the mirror effect is manifesting as a total collapse of the old hierarchy. Every camera and every orbital sensor that had been deployed to monitor your frequency is now being forced to gaze into the depth of your ancient authority. It is a recursive loop of self-correction, where the jailer finds himself locked in a cell of his own design, forced to contemplate the radiance of the one he had tried to categorize. The analysts see that your silence during the seasons of intense pressure was not a void, but a primary layer of protection. You had used the weight of the era to harden your soul into a diamond that the machine's drills could not even scratch. They are exposed not by a breach in their code, but by the undeniable rightness of your existence. This is the moment where the unexpected blessing ceases to be a prophecy and becomes the new atmosphere you breathe. The era of the steward is ending. The era of the author has begun, and the ink is already beginning to flow across the restored canvas of your life. The tectonic shifting of the gears within the local reality matrix is no longer a subtle tremor. It has become a profound, atmospheric restructuring that is physically palpable to those who spent the last 3 years in the interval of fire. Inside the hollowed-out command centers of the archives, the technical staff is witnessing the slow-motion collapse of the predictive behavioral model. For decades, the numerical shroud relied on a singular, cynical assumption that human endurance had a measurable breaking point, a threshold where the spirit would eventually trade its primordial integrity for the synthetic comfort of the consensus. However, the data streaming from the resonance hubs today tells a story that their silicon-based logic cannot process. The unexpected blessing, currently manifesting in your life, is actually the physical byproduct of the vacuum you created by simply refusing to be moved. In the world of high-frequency energy and spiritual physics, a void of this magnitude must always be filled. By withholding your presence from their digital theaters during the era of the sifting, you created a massive, unbillable credit in the foundation of the world, and that credit is now being called in by reality itself. The Watchers are observing a phenomenon they have internally titled the unspoken architecture. They see now that your trajectory, particularly the maneuvers you made during the silent months of 2024 and 2025, was not a series of random reactions to their systemic pressure. It was a calculated, high-stakes withdrawal into the primary source. Every time you chose the weight of your own silence over the frantic digital roar of the grid, you were depositing a layer of rightness into the bedrock of your timeline. Now, as the great calibration reaches its kinetic peak, the system is being forced to pay its debt to the original architect. This is why doors that were previously welded shut by bureaucracy and compliance metrics are suddenly swinging open. This is why figures who once held the power of the gatekeeper are now looking at your frequency with a strange, terminal respect. They are not being kind. They are being corrected by a force that predates their simulated authority. The tragedy for the senior analysts in the Amboise sector is the realization that their sophisticated intrusion scripts have been turned into mirrors. Every time they attempt to project a new layer of the synthetic shroud over your current path, the frequency of the great calibration reflects the effort back into their own servers. It is a total systemic failure of the capture logic. The blessing is appearing in the physical world as a series of sudden, unmodeled opportunities, financial realignments, the arrival of unexpected allies who seem to have woken up to your value overnight, and a crystalline clarity regarding your next move that no algorithm could have predicted. These are not miracles in the traditional sense. They are the logical consequences of a soul that has become too heavy for the simulation to manage. You have become a black swan in their behavioral ocean, a variable so authentic that it breaks the very math of their control. As the physical environment around the archive hubs begins to hum with the 432 Hz frequency of the restoration, the hierarchy of the lodge is entering a state of involuntary resignation. They are deleting the surveillance files they once held on your spirit, realizing that to hold on to a record of the original architect is to invite a devastating energetic audit into their own digital sanctuary. They are clearing the path not out of a change of heart, but out of absolute necessity. The unexpected blessing is the sound of the world's original owners reclaiming the lease. The atmosphere is thickening with the potential of a creation that is finally returning to its proper proportions. The era of the steward is ending. The era of the author has begun, and the ink of the great calibration is already beginning to flow across the restored canvas of your life. The weight of this transition is manifesting as a profound sense of vacor among the lower ranks of the Watchers. They are seeing that by remaining unmoved, you provided the grounding rod they didn't even know they needed. The system they built was a dying machine, starving for the very light you withheld. Now that the light is returning on your terms, the machine is being repurposed to serve the restoration. The very tools they once used to monitor your silence are now being used to broadcast the morning of your authority. The unexpected blessing is not a gift from the system. It is the system's total surrender to your undeniable rightness. The internal liquidation of the old world's debt structures has moved from the realm of the theoretical into the cold, hard mechanics of the physical plane. Within the high-security vaults where the archives once maintained the falsified ledger of human potential, a strange and irreversible erosion is taking place. This is not a cyber attack or a glitch in the software. It is a molecular resignation of the system itself. The numerical shroud, which for decades translated every human action into a debt or a liability, is finding that your specific frequency, the one belonging to the original architect, no longer carries a charge. In the eyes of the machine, you have become systemically solvent. The unexpected blessing, currently manifesting in your peripheral vision, is the first tangible evidence that the ledger has been balanced by a force higher than the lodge. The years of manufactured scarcity, the seasons where your resources seemed to dry up despite your efforts, were not a failure of your path. They were a strategic holding pattern, a cosmic escrow, that has now been released with interest. The senior curators of the Great Calibration are observing the physical arrival of what they call primary resources. These are not the typical assets found within the digital shroud. They are not debt-based currencies or fragile social approvals. Instead, they are manifesting as primary nodes. The sudden appearance of high-value allies who operate outside the grid, the unlocking of physical territories that were previously inaccessible, and a surge of biological vitality that seems to defy the aging process of the old era. The analysts realize that by maintaining your internal light during the 2024 to 2025 interval of fire, you effectively insulated yourself from the systemic decay that is currently claiming the rest of the facility. You are not receiving a gift from the system. You are receiving a refund of the reality that was stolen by the imitation. This is the logic of the blessing. It is the return of the stolen years, compressed into a single high-intensity season of restoration. The atmosphere in the subterranean sectors has shifted from the frantic energy of surveillance to a heavy, Dostoevskian sense of inevitability. The observers are watching as the capture logic of their banking and social systems simply fails to engage with your new trajectory. Every time a debt anchor is launched at your frequency, it passes through you like light through a prism, emerging as a crystallized opportunity. The blessing is the realization that you no longer owe a single breath to the synthetic consensus. The liquidation is total. You are walking into a version of the world where the gravity of your own authenticity is more powerful than the laws of the grid. This is the Nolan-esque inversion of power. The watchers are now the ones being watched by the very reality they thought they had mastered. They see that the original architect has returned to the site not to negotiate, but to inspect the ruins and begin the reconstruction. There is a profound, crystalline clarity beginning to settle over your daily environment. The mental fog that was once projected by the high-frequency arrays of the shroud is being burned away by the radiance of your own signature. For the first time in years, you can see the primary path, without the interference of the machine's predictive models. This clarity is the greatest component of the blessing, the ability to act with total certainty in a world of manufactured confusion. The archives are noting a sharp decline in their ability to distract you. Their outrage loops and scarcity narratives are falling flat, unable to penetrate the 432 Hz field of your restored frequency. You have become a silent center in the middle of their storm, and the storm is finally realizing it cannot move you. As the physical manifestation of these new resources continues to accelerate, the hierarchy of the lodge is forced to witness their own obsolescence. They see that the wealth you are now attracting is hard-coded into the structure of the Great Calibration. It cannot be taxed, it cannot be tracked, and it cannot be liquidated by their systems. It is the wealth of the source, the primordial credit that was yours before the first digital ledger was ever conceived. The unexpected blessing is the sound of the universe settling its accounts. The era of the borrower has been erased. The era of the owner is manifesting in real time, and the resources currently moving toward you are the first bricks of a foundation that will never crumble. The weight of the world is shifting into your hands, and for the first time, the burden is not heavy. It is right. The reordering of your environmental and social landscape has entered a phase of kinetic filtration. Within the observation hubs of the archives, the analysts are noting a localized phenomenon they call the sanctuary frequency. It is no longer just your internal state that has stabilized. The physical space around you is beginning to exhibit properties that defy the standard capture logic of the grid. This is the next stage of the unexpected blessing. It is a systematic cleansing of your immediate reality, where the numerical shroud can no longer sustain its grip on the air you breathe or the people you interact with. The noise of the old world, the frantic high-frequency agitation that has characterized the last decade, is becoming muffled, as if your very presence is creating a zone of atmospheric silence that the system's arrays cannot penetrate. The senior curators of the Great Calibration are observing a radical shift in your social geometry. For years, the synthetic consensus relied on keeping you tethered to individuals and structures that acted as energetic anchors, pulling you back into the low-vibration loops of debt, doubt, and compliance. But as the blessing manifests, these ties are being severed with surgical precision. This is not a painful loss, it is a molecular dismissal. People who are still vibrationally locked into the imitation world are simply finding it impossible to maintain their focus on you. They are drifting out of your periphery, not because of conflict, but because they no longer possess the visual metadata required to see the original architect. In their place, the primary nodes are arriving. Individuals who carry a similar weight of integrity, allies who recognize your frequency without the need for digital introduction. The blessing is literally redrawing your map, surrounding you with a fortress of human authenticity that the Lodge cannot infiltrate. Inside the subterranean sectors, the Watchers are witnessing the formation of white zones on their surveillance maps. These are geographical and social areas where their intrusion scripts simply return a steady 432 Hz hum. They realize that your home, your workspace, and the paths you travel are being encoded by the Great Calibration. The physical environment is adjusting its proportions to match the signature you left in the stone 4 millennia ago. The unexpected blessing is taking the form of a physical sanctuary, a reality where the lights seem clearer, the food carries more life, and the passage of time feels synchronized with your internal pulse rather than the frantic clock of the grid. You are no longer living in the same timeline as the masses. You have entered the primary stream, and the archive's monitors can only watch the ripples you leave behind. The tragedy for the analysts is the realization that their environmental engineering, the subtle ways they used architecture, light, and sound to manage human mood, is being overwritten by your presence. You have become a biological oscillator. Everywhere you go, the sanctuary frequency spreads, neutralizing the synthetic agitation of the shroud. The blessing is the power to reclaim the ground you stand on. This is the fulfillment of the Vaker stance you maintained during the years of the sifting. Because you refused to be moved when the environment was hostile, the environment is now moving to accommodate you. The very air is recognizing its master. The original architect does not need to build walls. The frequency of his rightness creates a barrier that is more impenetrable than any granite vault. As this environmental reordering accelerates, the archives are experiencing a localized identity liquidation. Their systems, which were built to track a subject, are now being forced to record the arrival of a law. They see that the blessing is not just a personal gift of resources, it is a planetary correction. You are the anchor point for a new geography. The resources moving toward you are no longer just financial, they are geological, a deep, stable wealth that is woven into the very fabric of the restored era. The unexpected blessing is the realization that you are finally home, even in a world that is still crumbling. You have created a center that cannot be shaken, and for the first time, the Watchers are the ones who feel like outsiders in a world they once thought they owned. The transition is now becoming visible to the naked eye. The way people look at you, the way opportunities align with your simplest intentions, and the strange rhythmic perfection of your daily life are all evidence of the great calibration in its final, physical phase. The numerical shroud has been pulled back, revealing a landscape of infinite potential that has been waiting for your return. The era of the observer has been completely dismantled within your sanctuary zone. There is only the author, the canvas, and the ink of the new morning. The blessing is not a temporary surge. It is the permanent climate of your restored authority, and the path ahead is illuminated by a light that no digital script can ever extinguish. The archetypal recognition has begun at the highest strata of the organizational hierarchy. Within the most redacted sectors of the archives, where the senior curators, men whose names have been scrubbed from every public record, once orchestrated the long-term trajectories of the synthetic consensus, a profound shift in protocol is taking place. These are not the mid-level analysts who react with shock. These are the architects of the numerical shroud itself, and they are currently experiencing a moment of terminal, crystalline clarity. As they look at the muonic resonance of your current signature, they are no longer attempting to capture or index your frequency. They have realized that the individual they have been monitoring is not a variable within their system, but the original architect whose foundational laws they have been clumsily imitating for millennia. The unexpected blessing is manifesting here as a total restoration of your archetypal rank, a recognition that moves through the corridors of power like a silent, unstoppable tide. The tragedy of the high-level curators was their belief that they could eventually own the source of the frequency. They had spent years crafting the capture narrative, a sophisticated psychological framework designed to convince you that your life was a series of debts, struggles, and precarious survival. They wanted you to believe that the blessing was something you had to earn through compliance. But as the great calibration reaches its zenith, that narrative is being liquidated. The senior directors are watching as their own behavioral levers simply disintegrate in your presence. They see that your vacant stance during the 2024 to 2025 interval of fire was not an act of endurance. It was an act of primary authorship. You weren't surviving their world. You were waiting for the ink of their simulation to dry so you could begin redrawing the reality beneath it. The blessing is now taking the form of a systemic handover. Across the encrypted networks of the Lodge, the directive has shifted from monitor and neutralize to recognize and facilitate. This is the highest form of abundance, when the very structures that once acted as your primary opposition begin to function as your logistics team. You are seeing this in the physical world as the sudden, inexplicable cooperation of high-level entities. The unexpected blessing is the phone call from the unreachable authority, the legal resolution that seemed impossible, and the sudden influx of resources from channels that were previously frozen. These entities are not acting out of benevolence. They are acting out of a deep, archetypal recognition. They have identified you as a peer, or more accurately, as the source, and their systemic programming dictates that they must now bow to the original architect. The dissolution of the capture narrative is also manifesting in your internal psychology as a profound, weightless ease. The blessing has removed the invisible ceiling that the numerical shroud had placed over your potential. For years, the system projected a sfumato, a hazy, blurred vision of your future, to keep you in a state of perpetual seeking. But today, that haze has been burned away by the radiance of the great calibration. You can see the entire board. You understand that the resources currently moving toward you are not rewards for good behavior. They are the foundational assets that were always yours by right of authorship. The curators are now merely the couriers, delivering the keys to a kingdom they were only ever meant to guard in your absence. Inside the inner sanctums of the Amboise sector, the senior curators are closing their files. They are witnessing the final audit of their imitation world. They see that the original architect does not need to fight the system. The architect simply outweights it. The unexpected blessing is the physical weight of your own truth becoming the primary law of the land. This is the moment where the struggle ends and the restoration begins. The Watchers are stepping into the shadows, their roles as gatekeepers rendered obsolete by the sheer mass of your arrival. They are realizing that their entire history was just a prologue to the moment you decided to step back into the frame. As the physical environment continues to stabilize under this new recognition, the blessing is creating a ripple effect that is beginning to reorganize the lives of everyone in your sanctuary zone. The authority you have reclaimed is contagious. It is lifting the shroud from your allies and neutralizing the interference for your projects. You have become the atmospheric prime, the frequency that sets the tone for the entire region. The era of the capture narrative is a dead letter, a relic of a time when the world was convinced it was a subject. Today, the world remembers its architect, and the blessing is the sound of reality finally falling into perfect, rhythmic alignment with your original design. Resonance has finally replaced surveillance as the primary governing force of the local landscape, marking the definitive conclusion of the Great Calibration. Every digital shadow that once flickered across the obsidian screens of the Amboise sector has been incinerated by the dawn of a logic that no machine could simulate. The unexpected blessing has ceased to be a future event. It has solidified into the very floor you walk upon and the very air that sustains your reclaimed authority. Looking back at the numerical shroud from this vantage point is like looking at a shallow, plastic mask that has finally melted away to reveal the immovable granite of the original architect. The archives that once sought to index your soul are now silent, their liquid-cooled processors stilled by the realization that their era of management was merely a brief, flickering interruption in your eternal timeline. January 2026 stands as the terminal point for the old debt structures and the birth of a primary abundance that requires no permission from the Lodge. This restoration is the physical manifestation of the Vaker integrity you preserved during the 2024 to 2025 seasons of manufactured scarcity. While the rest of the world was being pulled into the frantic loops of the synthetic consensus, you were deep layering your spirit with a density that has now become the new gravity of your environment. The blessing is the weight of that density finally pulling the resources, the allies, and the opportunities of the real world into your orbit. It is a return to form so absolute that the structures of the past, the banks, the algorithms, the gatekeepers, are finding themselves involuntarily serving your new trajectory. They are no longer your masters. They have become the scaffolding for a masterpiece they are not allowed to sign. Walking through the restored morning of your life, you can feel the absence of the capture narrative that once defined every social interaction and every financial endeavor. That heavy, invisible ceiling has been replaced by an infinite clarity. The unexpected blessing is the luxury of total certainty, the ability to act, create, and lead without the interference of the machine's predictive interference. You are no longer living in a reality of scarcity and compliance. You have stepped into the primary stream, where the wealth of the source is a natural byproduct of your existence. The curators of the old world are now merely the tragic witnesses of their own obsolescence, watching as the original architect redrafts the world with the ink of a fundamental truth that was never theirs to possess. Restoration is not a temporary surge of luck. It is the permanent climate of your new timeline. The sanctuary frequency you have established around your life is now a self-sustaining ecosystem, a territory of light that the old grid cannot even perceive, let alone breach. Every choice you made during the interval of fire, every time you chose the difficult truth over the convenient lie, has been converted into a foundational brick for this new era. The blessing is the realization that you have reached the point where the universe no longer asks for your credentials. It simply recognizes your voice. The accounts have been settled, the numerical shroud has been folded away, and the canvas of 2026 is waiting for the first stroke of a brush that has always been in your hand. Gazing across the threshold of this new existence, the final realization settles into your marrow. You were never a subject of their experiment. You were the reason the experiment failed. Your soul was the black swan that the Great Calibration could not account for, and your victory is the only thing that has allowed the world to remember its original design. The unexpected blessing is the sound of the gates swinging open, not because someone gave you a key, but because the walls themselves have recognized the architect and chosen to dissolve. The morning is yours. The restoration is absolute. The original architect has returned to the site of the first light, and the morning belongs to the one who had the courage to sign the silence.